Whoa, diving deep with this one. Sri Aurobindo and Treasures of the Soul, from a YouTube video no less. Channeled message or not, it's got me thinking.
Right. Like, talk about a life story.
Yeah,
Scholar, revolutionary, poet, the man founded a spiritual community. Safe to say, he was onto something, even if channeling's not your thing.
seriously. Not your everyday revolutionary poet mystic, huh? But okay, let's get into it. These Treasures of the Soul, definitely not talking about cash here. What are they? How do we find them?
He calls them profound understandings, those deep insights that come from, well, living consciously. And a big part of that is connecting with something bigger than ourselves. He calls it the one, or the being.
So tapping into that universal energy, the divine, right? But it's not just sitting around waiting for a lightning bolt of enlightenment. He mentions a triple action thing, right?
Yeah, and this is key to his whole philosophy. It's like a three-part approach. Aspiration, surrender, self-giving. One builds on the other, like a recipe for growth, spiritually speaking.
Aspiration. I'm picturing like reaching for something just out of grasp, always striving to connect with that divine.
Perfect way to put it, that constant devotion aligning with divine will. But here's where it gets interesting. Gotta have surrender too.
Wait, really? Striving, but also letting go doesn't quite compute.
Exactly. Letting go of control, of needing to dictate how enlightenment goes down. Those ego things, desires, fears, preconceived notions. They block us from really embracing the divine plan.
He even says to reject constructs. What's that about?
Basically, those stories we tell ourselves that hold us back. I'm not good enough. I can't do that. Those are constructs. They stop us from being our full selves.
So we're actively pushing back against those negative thoughts, breaking free.
Yeah. And that's where the rebellious energy he talks about comes in. Not rebelling against, like, the government, but against those voices in our heads keeping us small.
Love that. Okay, so we're striving for something higher. We're surrendering control. What about self-giving? How's that fit in?
This is where it all clicks. You've got the aspiration, the surrender. Now offer yourself completely to that purpose. It's not about what you get, but what you give.
Aligning your actions with those big aspirations, really living out that divine connection.
Right. And Aurobindo says in that offering, that complete surrender, that's where true freedom is.
Wow. Freedom through surrender. There's something powerful about that. So
Mhm.
we're aspiring, we're surrendering, we're offering ourselves up. Where do relationships fit into all of this? Seems like prime real estate for those treasures of the soul to pop up.
Big time. Aurobindo's big on relationships becoming holy through this inner work.
Right.
But he's not talking about, like, problem-free utopia. It's more about how we show up in those relationships.
Makes you think of that saying, wherever you go, there you are.
Mhm.
Can't just like meditate your way to perfect relationships, can you?
Nope. He's all about self-knowledge here. But not in a beat-yourself-up way. More like honestly seeing our patterns, our knee-jerk reactions, the ways we might be blocking things up.
Instead of dwelling on flaws, we acknowledge them, then choose differently.
Right. And when we make those different choices aligned with that purpose, that's when relationships transform. Happens naturally because we're showing up authentically with more love, even that rebellious energy he mentioned.
Hold up, rebellious energy in relationships. What's that even look like? Seems kind of at odds with all this surrender and self-giving.
Good point. This is where Aurobindo's own story is so wild. This is a guy who fought for India's independence, got imprisoned for his beliefs. He knew from challenging the status quo. Seems like that same spirit's needed internally, A&D, in how we relate to each other.
So not accepting relationship patterns blindly. It's about questioning the stuff that holds us back, individually and together.
Bingo. That commitment to conscious living, that triple action in relationships, it doesn't go unnoticed. He uses this image, a fragrance that comes from someone doing this inner work.
Love that, like an energy surrounding you, something others pick up on.
Subtle but powerful. And it comes directly from that divine connection we talked about. More aligned we are, stronger the fragrance.
Okay, so we've got soul treasures, the triple action of aspiring, surrendering, giving, and how that plays out with the people around us. We've even got self-knowledge and a dash of rebellion in the mix. But there's this big question for me. How much is intellectual versus actually experiencing it? Can you just like read about this stuff or do you have to live it?
$1 million question, right. And it's something Santi, the person channeling Aurobindo, is wrestling with too. Talks about chewing on these ideas all day, trying to grasp them fully. Which, I get it. If these are treasures of the soul, words only get you so far.
For sure. So how do we move past just understanding these ideas in our heads and actually experience them?
This is where Aurobindo gets real about the limits of our minds. He believed true knowing, it goes way beyond concepts. into feeling, intuition, that direct experience.
And man, he'd know, right? His own journey wasn't just thinking his way to enlightenment. He lived it. The activism, the prison time, the poetry, the whole community,
Yeah,
all part of the path.
exactly. That's what makes his view so interesting. It's not theory, it's lived experience talking.
And a big part of that was going beyond the intellectual into actually embodying knowing. Is that where the poetry comes in?
It does. He saw poetry as a way to get at those deeper truths, the stuff you can't capture with just logic and words.
It's like with this channeled message itself, right?
Yeah.
Trying to convey these huge, maybe impossible to fully explain truths through a different means.
Right. Using whatever tools we've got to bridge that gap between just getting it intellectually and truly experiencing it. Because it's not about hoarding info, it's about embodying wisdom.
So how do we actually do that? Bridge that head and heart divide. What's that look like day to day? It's like our brains crave those neat explanations, but some things, you got to feel them to get it, you know?
Totally. And it's funny because Aurobindo doesn't give us a step-by-step guide to bridge that gap, but he drops some serious hints about the inner work it takes.
Got to be the self-knowledge thing again, right?
Nailed it! But remember, not about beating ourselves up. It's that honest look at our thoughts, emotions, habits, the whole shebang.
Cause those automatic reactions, the ingrained patterns. That's often where we block ourselves off, isn't it?
Totally. Aurobindo talks about how our minds, especially when the ego's driving, they make all these constructs, false ideas about us, the world, what'll make us happy, the works.
And those constructs, those limiting beliefs, they trap us in these cycles of like suffering, disconnection from the real deal. It's like we're clinging to a life raft when there's a whole cruise ship waiting, you know?
Such a good analogy. And that's where that rebellious energy comes in again, not against the world, but against those assumptions we hold inside, those voices saying, you're not enough, not worthy, all that junk.
So it's having the guts to dismantle those constructs. Let something truer come through, something more aligned, I guess.
Yes. But that dismantling, that inner work, gets kind of rough. Aurobindo even says painful at one point. He's real about it.
Makes sense. Like breaking down the old to make room for the new.
Yeah.
Bound to be some rubble along the way.
For sure. But he's saying those tough moments, those hard truths, that's where the growth is, and we're not alone in it.
Right? He had the mother, his spiritual partner.
Right.
Like a co-pilot on the self-discovery journey.
Exactly. And he even says we can find guides, not just in people, but books, nature,
Yeah.
even those quiet moments where we connect with something bigger.
Tapping into that universal wisdom, that energy that's always there, if we just pipe down long enough to hear it.
Exactly. And those moments, those insights, they ripple
Yeah.
outwards, relationships, communities, even the world around us.
So as we wrap this deep dive up,
Mm.
it makes you think, right? If our lives reflect our inner state, what kind of world are we building with our thoughts, our words, our actions? What kind of fragrance are we leaving behind? It's like Aurobindo's inviting us on a treasure hunt, not for gold, but for that wisdom inside each of us.
Beautifully put. And the best part, this treasure hunt never really ends. There's no finish line where you're done. It's about constantly reaching, letting go, offering ourselves up to becoming something more.